She said it so calmly that it almost sounded reasonable, like she was asking me to pass the salt at dinner. Either we open the relationship, or we're done. I didn't react right away, and that silence made her lean back like she had already won. Her name was Sloane Harrington, and she had always been the kind of woman who spoke like decisions were already final. We were sitting in our kitchen in Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of kitchen people photograph for real estate listings, but in that moment it felt smaller than it ever had. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she wasn't nervous. She was prepared. That's when I understood this wasn't a conversation. This was a move. I nodded once and said, "Okay." Her eyes narrowed, not with relief, but with confusion. She expected resistance, not agreement. She expected me to fight for something she had already decided to change. But I didn't. And that was the first moment the balance shifted, even if neither of us said out loud. We had been together for 4 years. I was Nolan Prescott, a senior partner at a mid-sized investment firm, and she was a brand strategist who had built her career on understanding how people perceive value. Ironically, she didn't notice when she started treating me like something replaceable. At least, not consciously. The weeks leading up to that conversation had been subtle. Late-night texts she didn't explain. Longer hours that didn't quite add up. A kind of distance that wasn't loud enough to confront, but too present to ignore. I noticed everything. I just didn't say anything, because part of me wanted to see how far it would go without interference. And when she finally said those words, it confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't about freedom. It was about permission. Permission she had likely already given herself. Okay, it wasn't surrender. It was observation. Over the next few days, she became lighter, more relaxed, almost relieved, as if the weight of secrecy had been lifted. She started mentioning names casually. Not directly, not clearly, but enough. Colleagues. Clients. Friends. One name came up more than the others. Carter Whitfield, a consultant she had recently started working with. Successful. Confident. The kind of man who walked into rooms like he owned them. I didn't react when she mentioned him. I just listened. And the more I listened, the more I understood the situation wasn't symmetrical. She had already stepped forward. I was the one being invited to catch up. Before we go further, tell me honestly, if someone gives you an ultimatum like that, do you see it as a choice or as a conclusion they've already reached? Because at that moment, I knew which one it was. That Friday, she told me she'd be out for dinner. She didn't specify with whom. She didn't need to. There was a calm confidence in her tone that suggested she believed everything was now transparent. Approved. Accepted. I told her I had plans too. That part surprised her again. She paused for just a second before saying, "Oh, okay." That hesitation mattered. It was the first crack, because for the first time, she realized she wasn't the only one moving forward. The truth was I didn't have plans. Not yet. But I wasn't going to sit in that house waiting for updates on my own relationship. So I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Vivian Aldrich. We had known each other before Sloane. There had been something there once, but timing had pulled us in different directions. She answered on the second ring, her voice exactly as I remembered. Sharp, composed, grounded. We met the next evening at a quiet restaurant in Westport. No dramatic music. No tension you could point to. Just two people catching up after time had passed. But there was something different this time. Clarity. No expectations. No illusions. And that made everything feel more real. Meanwhile, Sloane was stepping into what she believed was her new version of freedom. She came home later that night, later than usual, and she didn't try to hide it. She wanted me to notice. She wanted to confirm that I was still emotionally invested, still reactive. But I wasn't. I asked how her night was, and she gave a vague answer. Then she asked about mine. I told her I had dinner. She asked with who. I said, an old friend. That answer bothered her more than any accusation would have, because it was incomplete, controlled, and she couldn't read it. Over the next week, the dynamic continued to shift. She became more attentive, not out of affection, but out of awareness. She started watching me the way I had been watching her, looking for clues, trying to understand what she couldn't control. That's when I realized something important. She didn't want an open relationship. She wanted a one-sided expansion. She wanted to explore without consequences, without competition. And now that variable had changed. The following weekend, she suggested we have dinner together. That hadn't happened in weeks. We sat across from each other again. Same table, same space, but nothing felt familiar anymore. She asked more questions than usual. Where I had been, who I had seen, how I felt. I answered calmly, directly, but without giving her more than she needed. Halfway through dinner, she put her fork down and said, "Are you seeing someone?" There it was. The question she didn't expect to ask. I paused, not for effect, but because I wanted to answer honestly. I'm getting to know someone. Her expression changed in a way she couldn't hide. Not anger, not sadness, something closer to displacement. Like the ground had shifted under her feet without warning. "You move on pretty quickly," she said. And that's when I understood the real conflict. She didn't expect me to adapt. She expected me to remain, to stay in place while she explored options, to exist as a constant while she tested variables. But that's not how equilibrium works. If one side moves, the other side doesn't stay still. It adjusts. Before we go further, what would you have done in that moment? Would you have reassured her, or would you have let her sit with the reality she created? Because I chose the latter. I didn't move on, I said calmly. I moved forward. That distinction mattered. She didn't respond right away. She just sat there, processing something she hadn't prepared for. The next few days were quiet. Not peaceful, not hostile, just quiet in a way that suggested both of us were reevaluating the same situation from different angles. Then came Sunday. She walked into the living room, sat across from me, and said, "I don't think this is working." And for the first time since that initial conversation, she sounded uncertain. Not commanding, not confident, just human. I nodded slowly. I agree. There was no argument, no raised voices, no theredditnarrator. Just two people acknowledging that the version of the relationship she proposed wasn't sustainable once both sides participated equally. She expected freedom without friction. But reality doesn't operate that way. Every action creates a reaction. Every shift creates a counterbalance. And when she saw that balance forming, it wasn't what she wanted anymore. We separated a few weeks later. Cleanly, respectfully. No public fallout. No accusations. Just a quiet understanding that what we had no longer aligned with what we wanted. As for Vivian, things didn't turn into anything immediate or dramatic. We didn't rush into something new. We just continued talking, spending time, letting things exist without forcing them into labels. And that, ironically, felt more stable than anything I had experienced in years. Because there were no ultimatums, no conditions disguised as choices. Just two people moving at a pace that didn't require control. Looking back, I don't think Sloane was trying to hurt me. I think she was trying to expand her world without realizing that doing so would change mine too. And when that change became real, it wasn't the version she imagined. It never is.